So thank you all for coming out. I'm really happy to be here and to introduce Giorgio Fontana. Just a little bit about him. I've got this list. It's a pretty impressive list of credentials he has. He's the co-editor of a literary quarterly called Eleanor Rigby, which I'd love to know more about at some point. But he's also a contributor to several Italian newspapers and foreign newspapers, including the Corriere della Sera, Il Manifesto, Tutto Libri. And also, we've got some Wired Italia, and about a half dozen more publications he's written for. I don't know how you have the energy or the time to do this, but you're young. You're young.
I'm pretty young.
His first novel debut was Good Intentions for the New Year. That was published by Mondadori in 2007. He's followed that up with nonfiction, short stories, another novel. And the one we're going to talk to him about today is Death of a Happy Man. That's published by Celerio. It was published last year.
Exactly,
2014.
yeah, last year.
And so for any publishing houses who are looking for a book in translation, it's not yet been acquired, so it's open game for everyone. So anyway, I've actually talked to a couple of others I've talked to. So welcome. You just flew in 3 hours ago.
3 hours ago, more or less, from Chicago. I was there. I had a very nice meeting at the Italian Institute of Culture in Chicago. Lovely city. It was my first time there. And now I'm back in New York. I've been here for the first time 2 years ago, and so very happy to be here again.
Well, so your novel is set during the years of lead, and it follows the life of Giacomo Colnaghi, who's he's a magistrate. And well, if you could tell us a little bit about this, talk to us about the years of lead, this person, and why this era.
Sure. Well, the first idea of writing about Giacomo Colnaghi actually came from my previous novel, Per legge superiore, By a Higher Law. That's the title. And Giacomo Colnaghi was already there as a minor character, but once I finished it, I thought that it was that interesting that he deserved another shot, a big shot, like a novel just for himself. And you know, when a character keeps knocking at your door, the only thing that you can do in the end is to write him down. So I did. And the idea of writing about the years of lead, that's the period in Italy more or less between 1969 and 1981, which is characterized by a strong terroristic attack against the state, both by neo-fascists and left-wing terrorists. So a very complex period of our history was, of course, something that scared me, scared me a lot, because of its complexity, of the fact that the wounds that it produced on the tissue, on the society tissue of my country, are still wide open somehow. And I didn't live it direct. I didn't experience that period. So the problem was to tackle it the right way. But again, the character was knocking at the door, so I just write it down. There's also another period that I speak about in the book, which is the period of the resistance during the Second World War, when the partisans in Italy fought against the Nazi fascists. So it's basically two stories packed in one.
So who is this Colnaghi? What is his role in your novel, and why choose to write about him? I know you said that he came from a previous novel, but what's the significance of him?
Sure. Colnaghi is a magistrate, a state attorney, more exactly, and he's young. He's very good. He's also very nice and has a good character. And I started writing about him inspired by two real figures, by two real persons who got killed by left-wing terrorists in 1979 and 1980 respectively, which are Guido Galli and Emilio Alessandrini. Two magistrates got killed, not because they were bad people or particularly into repression against the movements. On the contrary, because they were very good, they were Democrats, they were open-minded, they knew what was at stake, what was going on, and that tragically made them the perfect target for these terrorists. So it was interesting, in my opinion, to address this period from the point of view of a victim, actually, but not, but before he gets victimized, let's say. So even if the title of the book is Death of a Happy Man, I decided to write about his life. So it's, in my opinion, it's a book which is full of life, full of love also somehow. And I was also intrigued by the possibility of tell about this character, also comparing him with the history of his father, again, who was a partisan in the 1944. And in the end, I guess that my aim was to tell those years which were very public, very publicly lived in a very private way. So it's a kind of very introvert, very existential novel, not a very public one, not a political one.
And can we assume that this happy man, that Kolnagi, is the happy man of the title?
Well, there's I decided to be a bit elusive because the happy man can be either Kolnagi or his father, Ernesto Kolnagi. But yeah, in the end, I guess that the happy man of the title is Giacomo, and it can sound a bit strange if you read the book, because Giacomo Kolnagi is not always full of joy. He's also a man who has his own contradictions, who is sometimes also very tormented by his past, by the figure of his father as well. But in my opinion, he's happy in the end, because he really lives the day. He really lives the day, and he's very fond of his job, and he lives his job. He experiences it like a true mission, a moral mission, which is a dimension that I really wanted to explore more in my novel.
And what is the major conflict or obstacle that the main character faces?
Well, you know,
an actual conflict, or is it one more of a psychological or a social one?
I'd say both. Of course, there's a real conflict in Italy, and the fact that in the end he got killed by the terrorists represents the sheer fact that he was in danger. So the conflict was extremely real, extremely there. But the main conflict is very psychological. It's very inside the character, because he's like he doesn't really get what's happening in Italy in that moment. For the whole novel he keeps on wondering why these young men are deciding to killing people just to support a revolution that it will never come up, because it wouldn't. And also there's all that's the main theme of the relationship with his father, who Kolnagi never met actually, because his father died when he was just 1 year old. And so the whole book is like kind of silent dialogue, a silent conversation between these two figures, two heroic figures both, because Ernesto Kolnagi dies while fighting against the Nazis, and Giacomo Kolnagi dies while fighting against the terrorists. So clearly the conflict is very, you know, it's multifaceted somehow, because it's political, interior, psychological, sociological. It's a very conflictual book.
So I noticed that the book takes place in 1981, at the end of what you said is more or less the end of the oh, I thought it was someone else talking, this time period. It also happens to be the year you were born. anything about that? I mean, I thought it was really wonderful. Was it a curiosity about this time, perhaps in your parents' lives, or was it just something that you felt was interesting in Italian history? But the year that this ended was the year you were produced. So
no, I know. That's in fact, I guess it started as a pure coincidence because, as I said in the previous book, I had already decided the year when Giacomo Colnaghi had to be killed, and I wrote down 1981 just because it's a plausible time. It was a plausible year for his death, for the period. But again, like thinking about it now, probably there was some subconscious forces that drove me to put the novel in action right in 1981, because maybe I was interested into this period also for personal and political motivations, for personal and political causes. And yeah, maybe there's more than a coincidence in this, because in the end the period that I tell about is the period that somehow gave birth to me, and this 1981 date is so it's very loaded somehow.
You've garnered quite a few awards last year for this book upon the publication, and it seems like you really take time to go into the life of this magistrate. I mean, he lives by himself. He lives on maybe it seemed to be on the outskirts of the city, in a way that is just very ordinary, perhaps even too ordinary. I mean, what was it like? I mean, you brought out details, what it was like. You almost gave us a slice of Italian life at this time period. Tell us how you got about doing it. Did you research it?
Yeah, the research part was probably it was huge. Actually, it was to write this book. I had to study a lot, so I delved myself into newspaper archives, for example, or footage of the period. Also, I talked a lot with people who lived directly those years, and of course I read loads of books, either from the terrorists, like memoirs, or from the victims' relatives, or anything, basically anything I could find about this period, because of course, one of the most important issues was to represent this period in the most honest way, in the most accurate way. Just because I didn't experience it again, so I needed to be the most accurate as I could. But again, there's another part of research which is probably a little bit more elusive in the book, and it's the geographical research, not just the facts, the historical facts, but also how Milan, in my opinion, at least I tried to make it emerge like a character and not only as a landscape, let's say. I'm very keen on Milan. It's my city. I was not born directly in Milan, but I have been living there for years and years. I studied there as well. And I guess it's the perfect place for such a story, for such a plot, and somehow it also reflects the inner conflict that Giacomo Colnaghi lives, and the very fact that he lives in the outskirts as well. It was a very conscious choice, away from the maddening life of the city center. It helped me to put it in a much more reflexive way, and to highlight as well the inner loneliness of my character.
I often like to ask novelists who are their literary go-tos. I mean, your own literary inspirations, either while writing this book or elsewise, in either Italian or any other writer who you read.
Sure. Well, my literary hero above anyone else is Franz Kafka. It's like everything that a writer should be, in my opinion. Then I would name Stig Dagerman as an exquisite Swedish writer, very little known, but probably the only son of Kafka's, and he died in 1954. Then I would say Joseph Roth, the great German novelist, Austro-Hungarian novelist. And then since we are in the US, of course, I'm glad to drop some American names. I'd say Don DeLillo, Richard Powers, and especially Bernard Malamud. He's one of my favorite writers. And as for the Italians, I'm not really into the greatest writers like Pasolini or Calvino or Moravia. I'm much more keen on names like Luciano Bianciardi and Giovanni Testori. Again, they're maybe little known, but they're very, very good writers, and especially Giovanni Testori is a great teller of Milan. So I got probably, if I have to say a name about the inspiration that drove me while writing this book, I would go for Giovanni Testori and Dino Buzzati's Un Amore.
Oh, fantastic. I also know you're a jazz fan. We were just talking about this right before. Jazz can play, or music can play, such a big part of literature, either inspirationally or in reality within the own text. Do any of your writing, or does any of your writing reflect your love of jazz, or is it something that you merely put on and listen to, perhaps to inspire you to write?
Well, that's a very interesting point. I guess that what I take from jazz, but from music in general, I love many types of music, but from jazz in particular, is the sense of melody. Like, you know, I guess that the phrase itself needs to have its own melody. I guess that I try to be as accurate as possible when I write, not only from merely stylistic point of view, but also I try to make the phrases sound. Like, if you read it out loud, it has to have a good sound. And this is a thing that jazz teaches you perfectly, because once for example, the trumpeter has finished, has breathed out all the period of his playing, then it's done. So it's a kind of very fragile equilibrium that you have to look for, and I guess that jazz, but also classical music, also rock and roll, taught me to establish it in my writing as well. So probably this is a very good lesson that I learned from Clifford Brown or or John Coltrane or Charles Mingus.
Yeah. And the whole idea of improvising as well, so not be fearful. So I think that's all the time we have right now. And if anyone has any questions or anything, I'm sure you'd be happy to answer.
Sure,
so
of course.
Anyway. So thank you so much again, and
thanks
really
a
nice
lot,
to
Mark.
meet you.
Me too. Nice to meet you.
Great, thank you.